The circular economy is all about design, creating products, services, and systems that are by their very intention regenerative. So for the millions of people around the world who are involved in shaping how things work, there's an opportunity to take a new approach, using creativity and craft to discover impactful solutions. But don't just take my word for it. Let's hear from some of the world's leading designers on what circular design really means for them. Welcome to the Circular Economy Show by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the UK-based organisation that promotes the bigger idea of a circular economy by working with key stakeholders to make system solutions happen at scale. My name is Joe Isles. I lead our circular design work here at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And now, design for circular economy, or circular design as we call it, it's a relatively new idea. It's based on the principles of a circular economy combined with systems thinking. But the application and influence of circular design is at the early stages. I think this is hugely exciting. It's a really exciting time. It's the moment when rules are written, they're then torn up and rewritten. The debates about the craft of circular design are fierce and boundaries are pushed. So today we'll celebrate that. We'll be hearing from a group of experienced designers who have been leading teams of innovators in large companies and creative agencies, and as well as being inventors and shapers in their own right. So coming up, we've got guests from Philips, from Dassault Systemes, as well as contributions from Sidley, IDEO, and Danone. All our contributors have a long list of their own achievements in the world of design. And you might think that they've seen it all. So what does circular design mean to them? Why does it inspire them? And why now? But before I'm joined by our live guests, let's just set the scene. Over the past few years at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we've been speaking to people in the design and innovation world to try and understand what we really mean by design. Who are the people that design things, that influence whether we live in a linear economy or an increasingly circular one? And how can we empower them to reimagine design? Here's the view of Alan Potts, Design and Innovation Director at DS Smith.
What we had to do is figure out how we could really involve our designers across our business to make a difference every day at product level. And there's some complexity in that for us at DS Smith, in that we have over 700 designers spread across 200 manufacturing sites across Europe and North America. So there's quite a lot of remote working in that sense. So we decided we're going to create ourselves circular design principles. So we created 5 circular design principles along with you guys at the foundation. And that really is kind of a guidebook. It's a process that help our designers day in, day out, and the hundreds of thousands of packaging designs that they're working on through the year, to become involved, to understand what it was more about, to translate the principles into some sort of hard day-to-day realities.
And the story of DS Smith, in some senses, is an ideal arc. Senior buy-in, set some strategies, some principles, work on adoption, and start to see impact on products. And no one's perfectly circular yet, but it's a good example of how that journey can work. What would be your perhaps one bit of golden advice for people in your position that are watching and maybe want to begin or continue on a similar journey?
Well, for me, it's keep it practical. That's the that's the main thing. You can get involved in the theory of circular economy and the principles and stuff, and there's so much content, there's so much this, that, and the other. But keep it practical. What do you want to do? You want to make a difference at product level. You want your designers to be designing along with the principles. And as I said before, let them loose, because they want to do this. They just need to be empowered to do it. They just need to have the tools to be able to do it and the confidence to challenge. So that was probably more than one, Joe. So sorry for that. But
No, it's wonderful. Let them loose. I like it. So that was Alan Potts with his advice on how to embrace circular design at DS Smith. Keep it practical. But that's just one perspective. Let's dive into some other perspectives on the circular design opportunity now and welcome our first guest into the studio. First up is Sean Carney. Sean's the Chief Design Officer at Philips, and he's going to outline what circular design means to him and tell us about some examples of Philips's journey towards the circular economy so far. Hey, Sean, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Joe. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And people may know that Philips is an iconic design company and has real cred in the design space. But they also, from their personal lives, might associate Philips with everything from toothbrushes to shavers to massive medical devices and even lighting systems. What's really in scope for you as Chief Design Officer at Philips?
So I'm fortunate that I get to oversee the whole of Philips, but as many of you will maybe know, Philips has been pivoting over the course of the last 10 years or so to become much more of a focused health technology company. So we still have consumer businesses around oral health care, mother and child care, grooming, beauty, and so forth. But we've moved away from lighting and TV and consumer electronics to really focus on that healthcare space. And I'm fortunate that my team gets to touch all these different components across the whole of the Philips portfolio.
And I guess maybe we'll get into it a little bit later, but that sounds like a great test for some of these new circular design approaches. If we're dealing with expensive and healthcare stuff that just has to work, then it's a good pressure test for some of those new design strategies. Maybe a little bit more about Philips, just so people are up to speed. So Philips, we've worked with Philips at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for a number of years now, and Philips has made an ambitious commitment to the circular economy, including to generate, I believe, 25% of sales from circular products, services and solutions by 2025. Could you tell us a bit about how that impacts your work and how circular design actually plays a role in that?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, we're becoming increasingly focused on healthcare and health technology. And if we look at CO2 emissions, for instance, more than 4% of the global CO2 emissions are actually caused by healthcare. That's not something I think a lot of people really think about. So, we really need to be conscious of this as we're trying to drive more access to care and increase efficiencies and effectiveness of the way care is delivered. And right now, the world's population is overusing resources across the board. So, and we're using it at a rate of 1.7 times the resource capacity of the planet. And, every hospital bed is averaging something around 13 kilograms of waste per bed per day. So there's huge opportunities to drive systemic change across the way healthcare is delivered. And that comes back to the role that we can play. And it's a great opportunity for designers to step in here and think about not only the hardware, the products and the way they're developed, but the way those products fit into, for instance, a care pathway alongside software, alongside consumables, and the way care is delivered. So thinking more at a system level than particularly just at an individual product level. And
obviously healthcare has been on people's minds a lot, especially in the past 18 months. Is there a suggestion that applying the circular economy principles can also lead to better outcomes? And that could be, I say better for the patients, better for Philips in terms of profitability. What are some of the benefits?
Well, I think it potentially is a win-win-win. We work on something called the quadruple aim principle. So that's, to first of all, make sure that the patient is getting both a good experience, but also getting the right outcome for them. In order to do that, we also recognize that we've got to deliver the best possible staff experience. So give the staff the experience, the tools, the capabilities, the technology they need to deliver those outcomes to the patient. And in doing that, we also need to make sure that we're reducing the costs, so taking waste out of the system. And I think when you start to look at it at a system level, then that's where the opportunity to drive impact at scale really comes in.
And just before we move on to talking about some of those examples of system scale, a lot of people circular design, when they think about circular design of products, they often think repair, remanufacturing, material selection. Are those all things that come into play for you as well, or are you solely looking at those kind of systems level things and the connections between the different parts?
No, of course, you need to look at the whole thing. So we know that the choices we make when we're designing a product have an impact. Something like 80% of the product's total environmental impact comes from the decisions which are made during the design phase. So it's really important we understand how long will this product be used, what's the energy it's going to be drawing down. But you have to go further than just the material selection. You have to think about, how is this product going to be repaired? How is this product going to be upgraded? Can we keep this product in life in the hospital for longer through designing with a more kind of modular and platform-based approach? So it does require kind of detailed thinking at the product level, but also to understand the context of use throughout the life of this product as well.
Fantastic. And maybe we could move on to an example. So is there something that springs to mind of how circular design and this new approach or new way of thinking has actually led to new solutions for Philips in that healthcare realm?
Yeah, so I think also for a circular economy, circular design, we've really started to think about how do we also create social impact beyond just environmental impact, but social impact, which means we've also got to think about innovating in the world of business models, pursuing that dematerialization, stop the focus purely on the hardware and the product, think about digitalization as well, and then maximizing that lifetime value of products for the customer throughout the duration of the life of those products. So as an example, in Africa, fairly recently, we were partnering in Kenya with the Ministry of Health and some local clinical partners to bring portable ultrasound into the hands of midwives and in primary care facilities in often remote locations. What these ultrasound devices would do, they're based on your cell phone. So they're using the cellular network, and they would provide both a combination of on-point obstetric screening to high-risk pregnancies. We would provide real-time video collaboration with more specialist caregivers who can be called up remotely. And we then supplement that with other cloud services. So for instance, artificial intelligence that would allow that midwife to spot problems and issues with that pregnancy at the bedside in that remote location. Now, as a concept that was developed around this African use case, but actually that's unlocked a new potential to take that ultra-mobile portable ultrasound into developed markets in Western Europe, North America, etc., where community midwives or general practitioners now have access to ultrasound on their cell phone.
And am I right in saying that conclusion, if you can call it that, wouldn't have been reached just by innovating in some of those markets you just mentioned, in Europe or in North America?
Yeah, it allowed us to reframe the problem. When you first look at the problem in the context, looking at it through, let's say, Western eyes, through developed market eyes, we would have naturally said, well, these midwives in Africa need access to ultrasound. but ultrasound's expensive. So could we cost reduce the existing product and make it appropriate, ruggedize it in some way for use in these locations? But when you're designing in context, on the ground, and co-creating with the people who are using this product, then it allows you to reframe the problem and design an innovative new solution, because we were there unconstrained. So that allowed us to really think outside the box and come with this innovative new approach, which is now scaling globally outside of Africa.
Brilliant. Well, if there are questions from the audience about that case study, do send them in. Maybe we can pick up on it a bit more later on. Sean, you've had a great career so far in design and in your current position as Chief Design Officer at Philips. What does circular design mean to you personally?
Yeah, so I think in the video you were showing at the beginning, I think you captured a lot of my personal perspectives there. This is too important for us to just leave as a design study, as a piece of academic research. I think if we're going to make an impact on both circular and sustainable economies, then we need to think about circular design in terms of driving impact. So we need to challenge ourselves as designers, but we can't do it alone. We need to work with our engineers, our marketeers. We need to think about the business models, because what we want to do is drive change at scale and make it sustainable. So it's not a one-off product anymore. We need to think about how we drive systemic change here. So we need to do things fundamentally different. And I think we need to embed circular design in the long-term strategic roadmaps of our businesses, and then also make sure that we're investing in educating the future workforce so they understand the nature of circular design as well, and the circular economy.
I'd love to pick up on that point about educating the future workforce a bit later on in the show. Stay with us, Sean. We'll be back with Sean a bit later on, and also with Asensio of Dassault Systemes in a few moments. But first, something to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. In the past 10 years, the circular economy idea really has been mobilized. It's out there. People are talking about it, and also we're seeing an explosion of innovation around this idea, some of which you've been hearing about already in this show. If you want to be at the forefront of the thinking around the circular economy, then you're going to want to tune in to Summit 21. It's going to take place online from the 8th to the 10th of June. And for the first time, the event will be freely accessible. It'll be open to everyone. So register today and join us to be part of this conversation around Summit 21. Together, we'll be exploring how we can shift our current linear system to create long-term economic growth and address some of the biggest global challenges that we face, from climate change, waste and pollution, and biodiversity loss. Let's take a look at some of the previous year's highlights.
I no longer fear those who pretend there is no climate crisis. I fear a situation where we become desperate, that we believe we cannot fix it anymore.
If you shift from linear to circular, you build a restorative, regenerative model, and it works economically.
And I think circular economy is maybe not so much a tool of disruption, but something that gives us hope.
These new constraints and opportunities that exist within the idea of circularity, and these new opportunities that exist within the idea of these new technologies, give us an opportunity for business and society to converge in new ways.
Unilever will not step back from our ambition to be one of the world's leading sustainable businesses.
The concept of circular economy is so important. As I said, it's a foundational blueprint, not just for social reasons, not just for environmental reasons, but for investment reasons.
If we use our ingenuity, if we use our creativity, we will translate this new effort around climate change into generating new realms of economic growth for everybody.
That's the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Summit 21. Tune in from the 8th to the 10th of June for that one. Next up, joining us in the studio is Asensio. Anne is the head of design at Dassault Systemes. the company that makes software used by hundreds of thousands of designers and engineers every day. And because innovating for the circular economy is about systems, it also requires new ways of working. So how can technology help? We're going to dig into that with Anne now. Anne, thanks for joining us on the Circular Economy Show.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So before we dig into that question around technology, I just want to hear a bit about your story. One of the Google results that comes up when you type your name compares you to the auto design industry's Britney Spears. It says that you've influenced the design of some of the most recognizable cars from Renault and GM, major automotive brands. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you've moved from chief design officer roles in the automotive industry and joined Dassault Systems to work so much on circular economy?
Well, actually, it's a very interesting question that I'm asking to myself. But I think the tipping point really arrived in 2002, 2003. I was at GM. I was working on a very important project. It was the premise of the Volt. That was the second big program GM was working on for electrical vehicle. And the sequel, that was the first full sales, really big, huge program that we were engaged. And during that time, we were really exposed to the cradle-to-cradle, principles. And that's really where I basically dip into circular economy, to make it simple. But clearly, working in the car industry, I would like to mention the fact that it was my passion, but it was also something that was growing really deep on me, because I believe the role of design is clearly to do utility things, things that just serve and improve life of people. That's really what we are really aiming to. And when you work in big company, when you work in company that works in the automotive and mobility industry, we know what this industry is currently doing in terms of harm to the planet. Working in a way that you want to be harmful is a very difficult and hard and deep question for a designer. And this question raised to me, I had a aha moment. I told you that, Joe, when I was one day coming back from work and driving and looking at all of those dealerships and all those cars on parking lots waiting for being sales, because as you know, design was first a seductive approach of design where you just want to provide this moment of truth, where people just want to buy something. And we needed to shift this extraordinary power and capability of design towards circular design, circular economy. So as Sean was very clearly expressing it, design is not about the product, it's about the system, it's about thinking systematically about the full aspect of design that include not just the material extraction or the way we are recycling, but getting into the comprehensive understanding of the full process of design. And that's why I moved to Dassault Systems, because that's what they do. They are providing innovation to any industry to actually digitalizing their operation, their strategy, their product, their, I will say, value, the way they deliver the value to their customers or to the society at large. So I thought for a designer was a big step, but that was a step that was needed. And I didn't regret it.
That's good to hear. And I love that sense of redirecting or applying the power of design towards different outcomes, not just that seductive element that you mentioned. So let's pick up on what you were just saying about Dassault Systems. Can you explain a bit about how technology and software generally, and maybe with a reference to some of the projects you've been working on, can actually help with circular design? We talk about it as a new way of doing things. Well, how can technology help overcome some of those barriers, some of that inertia?
First, when we talked about technologies as wide and imprecise as innovation or any other things like designs, first we need to understand that what Dassault Systems does. basically this company that is going to be close to have is 40 years or old of existence, is to digitalize the design process. That's really what is our aim. 3D, simulation, and what we call today the virtual twin. It's basically to virtualize the reality, every reality, the product, the service, the experience, the context, all into virtual universe, virtual environment, something that have a very barbarian word called model-based engineering system, that provide a possibility to actually have a twin of everything you do. We are providing those innovation to many industries, so we can actually gather a lot of intelligence through the way we basically are digitalizing all of those operations in various industry. So any best practice, any great idea we can find, by example, at Philips could be basically being very quickly reproduced, recontained, and reproposed to another industry. This is very possible due to this capacity of 3D and virtual twin. So in doing so, I would like to mention the fact that the question that we want to ask to ourselves is how we can empower and enable designers. Those technology that are not the digital technology that I may discuss later are clearly not in the hand of designers today. They are using 3D clearly for reproducing their product, to actually design a product, propose a product, a service or an experience, but they barely take this model-based system. What it means that you can manipulate a virtual product that gather all the information from all of the previous experiences that you may have as real evidence, of the real world evidence. So when you are talking about circular economy, if you are in a virtual world, you are basically circular. Because anything you learn in the virtual world enable you to actually understand the real world. And when you actually gather the data that you basically gain by reframing any problems in the real world, it gets back as data at the upfront of the process of design through that virtuous circle. So clearly those technology exist.
So what I'm hearing
yes,
is you're outlining a way of collaborating that sounds like it, in your opinion, is better suited towards the type of innovation, overcoming the type of challenges that we face in designing for a circular economy. People may be watching thinking, they have an image in their head of how designers or teams of designers work together as being hugely collaborative and interactive. But I'm getting the sense from you that there are barriers even in today's design practice that are preventing teams of innovators and designers from really unlocking the potential of a circular economy. Is that fair to say?
Actually, I think it's something that is growing within the design community, but it really started, and actually Sean was mentioning the complex problem that we are facing with circular economy, the huge systemic approach of the issues that we have to tackle cannot rely on designer only. You have to first start to really elevate any capacity, any expertise from every stakeholders of a given system. Let's say the system of healthcare, the system of urban planning, or whatever is your system, packaging, mobility. Every system requires that you have not just incremental, localized, eco-efficient solutions. You really need to put everyone into a systemic approach. But how do you gather those people around this common goal? So that's what Dassault Systemes did in '81 with product design, where we basically were able what we call a digital mock-up, where every stakeholders of the plane was able to actually see the plane, see every interaction, what everybody's doing, whether you're an electrical designer, an aerodynamic designer, and so on. So imagine that translation or that particular way of doing that is actually very, very sound and tactical today into circular design and circular economy. Imagine that. So I'm not saying designers have suddenly to become engineers and super geek with technology. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that today, the technology now are being displayed in platform where designer can interact with the right capacity, the right expertise. They just need to learn this new language to interact with those stakeholders and get access to those technology. Those technology are what we call cyber system, basically the way you reframe your design process in design thinking, how this translates into a system-based, database model. That means a virtual representation of your scenarios, of your thinking. The second is the capacity to modelize the different scenarios in a way that every people who have a stake on this scenario could actually interact with it. Then you have simulation. Simulation is huge. It's this capacity that we currently have by providing data that could first come from the real world by Internet of Things. Your device, the iPad you are just handing on in your hands, can actually gather information everywhere you go and nourish this model and get this model more and more up to date as you go with your process. But at the end of what you are mentioning, that I think is probably the most important one, is what also Sean was saying with the midwife in Africa. You want to actually have the opportunity to have human interaction where people can share their experiences in a way that is very social, very open, very, I will say, fuzzy, okay? And this is quite possible now with those technology because a model is something you decide or not to use or to interact with. But at least you cannot avoid it. And on the top of it, as you know, we can monitor. Circular economy is really about monitoring everything you do beyond just the state of design. How do you get extraction and material and track that material, where it comes from, how I use it. So it's gaining beyond just the scientific approach of what this material is made of, but where these materials come from and where it's going to go after my use and how it's being used. That kind of chain is a perfect way to enable companies to take basically action. I would like to say, by example, implement data from the circularity, that Ellen MacArthur is promoting. Anything, any data, any information, any learnings can actually nourish this model, but this model have to actually get access to every designers wherever they want and accessible in an open way.
Yeah. So, Anne, thank you. Stick around. I loved your pitch there around the circular design and the role of digital technology and how those are unfolding, or the real potential of those unfolding together. Do stay with us. We have questions coming in from the audience, which I'd love to put to both yourself and Sean in a few moments' time. And the team behind the scenes have been collecting those questions and have been going through and selecting some of the best ones. Before we bring Sean and Anna back in for that open conversation, as I said before, this is just a snapshot of the larger conversation that we've been having with designers and design influencers about the topic of the circular economy. And in this next video, you'll hear from representatives from Sidley, from IDEO, and from Danone, talking about what the idea of circular design means to them.
Trying to make circular economy a norm by bringing clarity to CEOs on what that is, what's the growth of the circular economy, what's the opportunity for them, and how to be part of the change. In terms of vision, circularity to me, it means progress. It's a new way of doing things. The old ways are no longer that much valid. And in terms of action, concrete things that we're taking on a daily basis is really coming together, becoming system thinkers, asking the whole spectrum of voices and of stakeholders to make sure that we're driving meaningful and clear change, not just something that we think on the side without involving the whole spectrum.
At Sidley, we take circular design step by step. every day, we train, we talk about it. This is step one. Step two, we actually question everything. We try to turn every end into a new beginning. And step three, we're trying to do. And this is the hard part. Doing, it's the hard part. And this is where we should all get our support and try to reinvent that creative journey all together. Thank you.
Chris here from IDEO in the forest. And forests can be so inspiring for circular design because in many ways they are the ultimate circular economy. Symbiotic relationships or ingenious partnerships help transport and regenerate nutrients around the system. All the nutrients are interoperable, and ultimately the system for producing nutrients is distributed, it's not centralized, and that's what makes it a resilient and fit system. So we've been thinking about how this inspiration, this forest inspiration, can act as a design tool, helping designers think of ways in which they can create healthy regenerative systems that move us out of an extractive paradigm and into a system paradigm that is all about collaboration and abundance and creating abundance.
As we created a platform to design for a positive social and a positive ecological impact at Danone, which we call One Planet, One Health by Design, we realized that designing for a circular economy for food requires not only a shift in mindset and intention, but also tangible tools and a knowledge base. However, to date, developers, both in small and big companies, do not have comprehensive and easily accessible data on the impact of their ingredients as they're creating their recipes, which is where we partnered with HowGood to develop and introduce Lattice. Now, Lattice is a software as a service that enables the food industry and puts the impact of each of the thousands of ingredients a developer can choose from at their fingertips as they are creating their products. And it does so in an easily accessible and playful way to make sure that designing for a positive impact is an empowering experience that leverages the existing passion and power of the millions of food designers and product developers out there to shift the food system by designing for a circular economy for food.
So a range of different perspectives on circular design there from IDEO, Sidley and from Danone, ranging from the practical, choosing different ingredients in the design of a food product, to the philosophical, how we can take inspiration from forests and design in a way that emulates nature, from Chris Grantham at IDEO. So adding to our range of perspectives we've been hearing today on circular design. And we'll bring back Anne and Sean now, Anne from Dassault Systems and Sean from Philips, to dive into some of the questions we've been having sent in from the audience viewing online. One that I quite liked, I think built on people hearing what circular design means to each of you, is what does it mean for your teams? The people the designers, maybe earlier on in their career, junior designers in your teams, what does designing for the circular economy mean to them? Have you noticed extra engagement around this topic? Sean, perhaps we'll start with you.
Yeah, in fact, the team is highly engaged on this topic. I think, as Philips has pivoted into this healthcare space, and our mission is all around improving lives. So we've even got a metric about that. So, we want to make sure that we're improving the lives of 2.5 billion people by 2030 and bringing access to quality healthcare for another 400 million by 2030 as well. And when you get that kind of purpose, that clarity of purpose, then people want to join you. But they'll become quickly disillusioned if they don't see that you're taking action to actually make that happen. So it's really important then that we empower our designers, and well, as Anne said, it's more than just designers, that we empower all of our innovators to really take action and make an impact and actually pick up programs and projects. So, that's one of the things we're very keen to do, is allow people to engage in this topic. So we've got communities of practice, we've got the design network, circular design network, also within the team as well.
And I guess as more designers who are passionate about some of the major challenges of today come and join Philips, circular economy being so established at the company gives them a framework to exercise that passion in a very real way. And we've had a very specific question for you from Nick, who's watching on YouTube, who says he loves the idea of the digital twin, but how does digital modelling handle the complexity and the fuzziness of real life? The real world can be quite unpredictable and people are not always rational. So how does effectively a piece of software account for that?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question because this is very, it's a very broad idea when we are talking about a virtual twin. Clearly, we have to stop to think on a virtual twin as a fixed model, something that you do as a product, but something as a dynamic posture. So it's very much like the design attitude. What I mean by that is to really start to gather some benefits of real world evidence within the system, that is the circular economy system of a design process. You actually need to actually augment this virtual model, starting first by the first investment, that is you have to start to digitalize someplace, somewhere, a relevant use case. And then you build up on this use case. I know that the theory is to actually digitalize the full process at once. It's never going to happen, okay? It's very much like the forest. We're going to grow as a rhizome, but we will start by any center because any center is a good place to start. Okay, that's what it's quite interesting with model-based. It's very much in organic way of seeing things. There are centers everywhere. The center is where you start. Then what is quite important, but that's really the most difficult thing, is to make sure that wherever you start, you are basically balancing all of the stakeholders of your proposition. So it's very much framing a design process and protocol there. You have to get in a location, you have to make sure that you have a 360 view of your problem. Then you should not, immediately see everything holistically, but work dynamically by growing. You have to also imagine that since it's virtual, I would like to mention another technology that is called generative design. And something that designers are really good in doing is calling variation of the model. When you get a model, you can vary this model as many times as you want. And data could also, as much as your thinking and intuition and experience, part of the I would say material for think and for thinking. And if you imagine that this way, you actually are growing dynamically. I will say a sustainable model. So I just would like to say that if at every step in the way where we see fragmented, eco-efficient strategies for food design, for mobility, anywhere, imagine that if we are on the side, great policy standardization of the regulation, we may start to see some kind of a framework that will enable designer to actually create what is really relevant and create what is the most important thing, aesthetical and ethical judgment on what is being selected at every centers of this model. So I know it may be very abstract or maybe a little bit high, but I'm telling you, it's already happening in the engineering side. It's manufacturing is already enabling with Industry 4.0 and the digitalization of the circular economy model. They are already doing it, because manufacturing is a place that today we can have huge impact on the planet by just providing monitoring and tracing and traceability of every action in the fabrication mode. So why not to think about all of those information to be information that will be provided to the designers at the upfront part of their process when they are framing idea, wherever it is. We are no more in a linear process and we have to start by the beginning. There are no more beginning. We can start wherever we think we have a good value to provide.
That's a great call to action. I've got time for one last question that I'm going to pose to you, Sean. You and Anne are both part of a group that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has brought together called the Circular Design Leaders. What's the role of speaking to your peers in other organisations? And does that give you hope that together, and not just with that group, but we can really shift the way that we practice design, which has been sort of entrenched for a number of decades now?
Yeah, I think as Anne was alluding to there, design really has to kind of now mature and grow up and respond to the opportunities of all these new ways of working and the technology and the data that's now available to us. Anne was talking about Industry 4.0 and systems engineering and model-based engineering. Well, design is also now looking to work in a similar way. So for instance, as we're creating and designing new hospitals, putting up new buildings, we're now increasingly doing a digital twin of that hospital up front and thinking about all of the way in which the different systems within that hospital are going to talk to one another. So we have BIM models, building standards, but we can now run predictive algorithms to anticipate how certain situations will be managed, looking at the patient flow, looking at the clinical pathways throughout that hospital. Now, as we do that, we will not be just impacting Philips products, we'll be interfacing with perhaps the heating, the ventilation systems, the planning software for the operating theatres, the lighting systems, the consumable materials in the canteen or the car parking. There are many other people who are impacting the way that building is actually going to be operating. Through digital twins and through artificial intelligence working off data collected from multiple sources, we can now predict the outcomes. And we can't do that as one industry alone. We need to interact with our peers in many other businesses as well, whether that be Danone on their food side or maybe Philips Lighting Signify or other companies like Honeywell, etc., who will come together increasingly to partner in building these digital twins to drive more of a circular economy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anne and Sean, for joining us here on the Circular Economy Show and answering so many of my questions and great questions from the audience as well. Thanks for joining us. So we've seen a snapshot of why some of the world's leading designers are embracing the circular economy. As we said at the top of the show, circular design is an emerging area of practice. But it's one that gives designers the chance to discover and deepen the positive impact that they can have, something we've heard a lot of today. And ultimately, they can play their part in building a healthier and more prosperous future. And it's just the start of that journey for many. And perhaps that's precisely why it's the most exciting time to be involved. Thank you once again to Anne and Sean, our guests for today. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Circular Economy Show, then you're just going to love the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Summit. Summit 21, freely available and open to all, broadcast online on the 8th to the 10th of June. So don't forget to register for that. Maybe I will see you there. Thanks for joining. See you next time.